welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I am your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. Joining me in just a little bit on the program, we have our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, and our South Texas correspondent in-house right here, Sandra Sanchez, to talk about a couple different organizations that are preparing their folks for the potential for ICE raids, not just in schools, but also faith-based organizations. So we're going to hear from both of them in just a little bit on that. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the news making headlines across the border, starting actually in Washington, D.C., because we've just learned that a very short time ago that tomorrow, President Trump plans to go out on patrol with police, rather today on patrol with police in Washington, D.C. Now, the president will join the Metropolitan Police Department and National Guard troops around the nation's capital amid a federal crackdown on crime. A White House official told The Hill that details of what Trump would be doing were forthcoming. You'll remember that the president ordered the National Guard to D.C. earlier this month to crack down for what he says is rising crime in the area. This is despite statistics showing that violent crime has declined in the city. D.C. officials and Democrats argue Trump's crackdown is about immigration. Also happening this week, the United States Coast Guard launched Operation Pacific Viper. They call it a surge in forces along the Eastern Pacific to stop the cartels and criminal organizations. Now, since initiating the program, the Coast Guard says it boarded several illegal vessels, seizing thousands of pounds of drugs and detaining several smugglers. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says 80% of drug seizures actually occur out on the water. She said as part of Operation Pacific Viper, a pair of Coast Guard vessels seized 7,700 pounds of cocaine and detained 6 Ecuadorian smugglers. And that is something, you just saw those lanchitas there. Those are things that we've been telling you about on, both sides of the border, over here down in the Rio Grande Valley, going up the Texas Gulf, as well as Salvador Rivera reporting actually on a boat with Border Patrol at one point. And we've been talking about the Coast Guard's increasing operations all along the Rio Grande, in the Gulf Coast, and on the Pacific coast there. So interesting to see these 6 people getting detained and 7,700 pounds of cocaine being seized. Again, that statistic from Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, just staggering. 80% of drug seizures occur at sea. Also happening about 230 miles west of Lincoln, Nebraska in McCook, dozens of protesters held signs up and shouted at plans to turn a minimum security prison for men into another ICE detention center. Now, we told you about Nebraska's governor's plan for this earlier this week to work with the Trump administration to open the facility they are calling the Cornhusker Clink. Protesters say they've received very little information from city leaders about the detention center in McCook. Now, the plans call for using 20 Nebraska National Guard soldiers to provide administrative, clerical, and local support. The inmates already at the prison will be moved in order to house up to 300 migrants at that facility. The Nebraska State Patrol also intends to sign an agreement with ICE, giving state troopers authority to help federal agents arrest people in the country illegally who have committed crimes. Time now to turn to our correspondents here. As we said, we have our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez. We have our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, and they're both kind of talking about the same subject today. Sandra, we'll get to you in a moment, but let's bring in Salvador now. Salvador, thanks again for joining us today. Couple major things happening over in your area of responsibility. Fill us in, sir.
It's mostly about education, or trying to educate the public about what's going on. Why don't we start with some video that we have from something that took place a few weeks ago near Oxnard, California, Camarillo, California, which is north of Los Angeles before you get to Ventura and then before you get to Santa Barbara. This is a raid that happened on some fields. ICE agents showed up and they raided the fields and created problems for the migrants, arresting a lot of them. Now, this is creating sort of a ripple effect. There are fewer field workers available, not just because of the arrests that have been going on, because there are others who are afraid to show up to work, thinking they might be caught in these sort of sting operations by ICE agents. So a lot of employers are seeing fewer and fewer workers available to work the fields, to pick the crops, to do the dirty work that has to happen before we can harvest crops. Now, these are scenes from in Calexico, California, but this is something that is happening not just in California, but throughout the United States. Again, ICE raids are taking place on fields, and this is creating a huge labor shortage. And again, this ripple effect is now taking place because a lot of the growers don't have the people to pick the fruits, and they can't get their products to small markets like this one. In California, we have a lot of these women, infants, and children supermarkets where pregnant women, low-income families, single moms can come in and buy produce at very low prices. But because of what's going on, because of the field worker labor shortage, these growers cannot get their products out to markets. They're not available. And what is showing up has been on overripe. They're almost to the point where you have to throw them away. They're not very good. Now, these scenes are from the San Diego Food Bank, which is also feeling the effects because it depends on a lot of surplus fruits and vegetables produce that growers get to them. So, but right now, growers, the fruit that they do have available, they are selling it to the large supermarket chains or overseas. But small markets, the food banks around the state are not getting the fruits and vegetables, and they're not making it available to people who depend on free fruits and vegetables, produce, or at very low prices. Again, this is sort of a byproduct of the raids that are happening here in California and throughout the country.
Now, Salvador, about a week ago, because we're having a very similar problem here in the Rio Grande Valley, lots of agriculture here. We're seeing this problem. We've actually had two city officials from the Rio Grande Valley come together. One of them is, although municipal elections are nonpartisan in the state of Texas, we do have one that aligns with the Republican Party, Mayor Javier Villalobos in McAllen. And there was a bipartisan meeting last week to talk about maybe asking the president for some leeway when it comes to field workers, construction sites, things where migrant labor is very big, these industries. Mm-hmm. Have you seen anything like that or any calls like that, bipartisan calls over on your side of the border?
We have seen calls for this type of effort to, again, alleviate, to make sure that the workers feel safe, that they're welcome, and they're not going to be harassed by ICE agents as they work. But nothing has taken place on the state level or the federal level, obviously. But yes, we are hearing there are calls for something to happen. We have heard about bringing back the Bracero program, something that we have talked about extensively in former programs. But again, nothing formal, nothing has happened. Perhaps in the future, because the food bank people were telling us, volunteers, the people who run the small stores are telling us that they are afraid that this is only going to get worse because the labor shortages. So we're not seeing workers showing up to pick the crops. So we are definitely going to continue seeing this. And perhaps as the prices go up, because with fewer supply, the prices are going to increase, not just at the small mom and pop markets, but also the big supermarket chains, the Vons of the world, the Albertsons, the Safeways. So we're all going to start paying a lot more for our tomatoes, for our celery, for our apples. And perhaps that's when someone is going to get serious and say, hey, we need to do something about it. Let's create some sort of a program, some sort of a sponsorship for these workers so they feel like they can go to work without being deported.
Yeah, very interesting how these prices could affect all of our dinner tables all across the country, not just down here on the border. And that's not even taking into account the tariff situation, which is a completely different conversation, which we are not going to be having today. But, as these ICE raids grow, a couple weeks ago, we saw a potential, student getting arrested by an ICE agent. I believe it was in Los Angeles. What are schools and organizations there doing to kind of prepare for the idea that this may happen on a more continuous basis?
Well, teachers here in California, hundreds of them, according to Union del Barrio, which is a big migrant advocacy group based in California and also has office offices in New York City. Now, it says it is training hundreds of teachers to do events like this one, where they pass out flyers, literature to parents as they're dropping off their kids. It informs them of the rights, of what they can do, what ICE agents cannot do, what they're not allowed to do, to arrest the parents or the students as they show up to school. Teachers are also not only educating themselves, but they're also out on patrol before every school day. They get in their own cars and they drive around the neighborhoods to looking out for ICE agents. And we were being told that they have learned how to spot the ICE agents, because most of the federal agents are always using American-made vehicles, specifically SUVs with heavily tainted windows. And we're being told that they are driving around spotting the agents just in case. If they do spot someone, they will alert the teachers, and they kind of go on a virtual lockdown, and they start informing parents about what might be ahead, what might lay in the shadows, so to speak. The teachers were telling us that they will continue to do these efforts. This will be on an ongoing basis because, as they see it, this is their own way of protecting parents and students, not only by informing the public, forming demonstrations like this one, which took place at Lincoln High School about 10 minutes east of downtown San Diego, but by also getting in their own cars, driving around the neighborhoods around their schools, looking out for ICE or federal agents. And this is happening around the state, here in San Diego, not just at San Diego Unified Schools, but at districts throughout the region. And because of things that are happening there, you see one of the vehicles that is on patrol around the neighborhood of Lincoln High School. But I also wanted to tell you about an arrest that did take place just outside of a school in Encinitas, California, which is about 45 minutes north of the border. Our colleague, Jennifer Franco from KSWB, put a story together. She's showing us what happened as a parent got arrested here in San Diego County yesterday morning.
Neighbors watch and record as ICE and ATF agents take a man in a construction safety vest into custody.
Right now, side
It happened Wednesday, 2 blocks from Parkdale Elementary School in Encinitas during morning drop-off.
The crossing guard that stands here was told to divert children around this melee that was happening.
Jessie Kahn says she was on her way to work when she stopped to see what was going on.
This was happening to a family. It was just devastating.
ICE says the undocumented man from Guatemala has a deportation order from 2017. They also say his alleged spouse arrived to the scene with a young child. That's when Kahn says she stepped in.
I took her child so that she could be the best wife and parent that she could be at that time.
The superintendent of the Encinitas Union School District alerted families and staff about the immigration enforcement incidents. The letter says a parent of an EUSD student was detained while driving to work, causing fear and trauma across the district. Former Encinitas Mayor and State Senator Catherine Blakespear is condemning the arrest.
It just should not be happening. It's so cruel and inhumane. Having people detained right as they're dropping off or around a school like that, what it tells me is that they're really hunting these people.
Community members, even from outside Encinitas, are also mobilizing to demand change.
It's traumatic enough as it is for the people. It's triply so on a child, watching it happen to their parents, wondering what's going to happen to them.
And inside council chambers, calls to leadership growing loud, urging them to act.
The students are with the teachers most of the day. And everyone needs to be trained with Know Your Rights.
You know, I really think that it's my responsibility to have the voice that a lot of my families they don't have. Please help us.
This is the type of situation that the teachers say they need to be ready for, and that's where they're training, educating themselves on what to do, how to protect their children and the parents of their students.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your reporting today, Salvador. We really appreciate it. Salvador Rivera, our San Diego correspondent. Stick around, though, because in just a little bit, we're going to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, to talk about something similar, but just a little bit different. And this includes faith-based organizations. We'll report live. We'll be back in 1 minute. Welcome back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles. I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. Don't forget that you can stay informed on the stories shaping the U.S.-Mexican border on your commute home, on your walk around the block with the dog, or maybe you're just looking to do something, listen to something while you're putting away some laundry. You can do that because Border Report Live is now bringing you real-time updates, expert insights, and voices from both sides of the border in podcast form. You can listen now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the iHeartRadio app. Time now to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez. Sandra, we were talking with Salvador Rivera, our San Diego correspondent, before the break about these teachers kind of preparing their students, and then people in the community in these school districts looking for some guidance from administrators in their school districts on what to do, how to act, keep an eye out for ICE. But there are also faith-based organizations. You spoke with one. Tell us a little bit about what they're doing.
Yeah, good to be here, and what powerful videos that we just saw. I spoke to Doug Padgett. He's executive director of this 501c4 organization called Vote Common Good. They have a free online toolkit for faith-based organizations, but anyone can actually download it. It's called How to Protect People During ICE Raids, and it really is exactly that. It doesn't require an email or any money or anything, and it's basically like a 15-point step-by-step action plan. It encourages churches to act as sanctuary safe spaces for people. Now, again, a 501c4, meaning they're a nonprofit, but they can, but they are a social wellness organization, but they can have political comments. And so he does cross that line in talking about. He tells me, we spoke for about 30 minutes today, that they have a network of about 5,000 churches, evangelicals, Christian, Catholic. Most of them have members, leaders who voted for President Donald Trump, but they are disheartened with how the ICE raids and arrests are going throughout the country. And as faith leaders, they feel like they need to step up and help some of their congregant members. Many of them, we've been talking about this here on the border. We've had these Know Your Rights seminars offered by La Union del Pueblo Entero, Lupe, and other organizations like Salvador mentioned in California. But in the interior, this is kind of new to them. And that's really where the focus of these raids are happening, these arrests are happening. So they're encouraging congregations to put up these posters, these signs they can download. There's even cards for their wallet. It starts by saying faith traditions call us to welcome the stranger, protect the vulnerable, and love our neighbors. What I really found interesting from my conversation with Pastor Padgett today was him saying that he has heard, and this is his opinion, but he says he's heard from clergymen, all and women across the country. And the outcome of these ICE arrests, conflicts, changes depending if a faith-based person is nearby, depending if a person of color or non-color is nearby. He says it tends to de-escalate the situation. The communication tends to be fostered better. And the arrests, the outcome seems to change. And basically they're encouraging faith-based organizations to, he says, quote, have courage, step up, take these actions, and, work to help this situation. And it is an extremely divisive political situation, as you know.
Yeah, very. I mean, just I think it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, we saw protests happening outside of a church in near Baltimore, Maryland, I believe it was. Their pastor was actually detained by ICE and taken and questioned over that. So are we starting to see more of these types of situations? Do you know if ICE is starting to show up to these churches, whether it be Catholic or Lutheran or whatever it may be?
Well, the Trump administration, what we see is what we see on social media, right? So do we quantify exactly where all these ICE arrests have happened? We don't know. Mm-hmm. What we see are the ones that go viral. But the Trump administration has said that they, agents can enter schools and churches if necessary. I mean, they limit it, but they say, if there's some chase going on or something's happening, that they have said they could. We've done stories, we've talked to priests and pastors here who have said, I won't let anyone in. But, under the Know Your Rights information, basically they're encouraging people, unless there's a warrant, don't let them in. Be extremely courteous. You can close the door. do not be confrontational, get a lawyer, don't say anything, and then from there, they have this 15-point plan where bear public moral witness. What's really interesting is they said work with media. Nobody ever wants to talk to us, right? No, he says get the word out, talk to media, and make arrests public, and spell out all the details. They're saying transparency and honesty is the key to de-escalating what's happening in our country right now.
And I believe we have a soundbite from the pastor.
We do. Pastor Paget.
Let's go ahead and play that.
Short of a church being a sanctuary community or sanctuary space, there's a number of things that churches can do. They can be trained in what are the rights of immigrants. They can offer their own connections and services to those people if they're in need. If ICE has come knocking at their door and they want to be in an interview with ICE, but they're not sure if it's going to be safe for them, they can reach out to church leaders and to members of congregations. So we're training those church leaders and congregants in what they can do to be supportive for people. And most importantly, these churches can create a support network that can run alongside the support network that so many immigrants in this country have. But they often will need someone who has other sets of connections, has other relationships. And our experience has been, and we're hearing this from pastors all over the country, that when ICE interacts with an immigrant and there's no one else there, they act in one way. And if there's any observer there, they act differently. And when there's a faith leader there, they really begin to act in ways that honor the person's rights and give them all the due process that they deserve. So we think there's a very special place. But to be truthful, a lot of faith leaders and people in churches, they've never thought about having to interact with ICE. They don't know what to do. They don't know what the laws are. They are unclear about how much they can engage and how much they can act. So part of our work with our toolkit is to help them know what they can do and how they can act.
He actually brought it local here to South Texas, mentioning Sister Norma Pimentel, Catholic nun who runs the Catholic Charities Humanitarian Respite, Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley's Humanitarian Respite Center. We've been covering Sister Norma for over a decade now with her work here, but she has been the subject of a probe by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who wants to interview her. There's been, he's been charging that some of these nonprofits could have played a part in human trafficking, and he wants to depose them, and she's been fighting them in court. She's been successful so far. Yeah, I said to him, you're encouraging churches and faith-based groups to take on the Trump administration. I mean, are you scared? Are they scared? He said, absolutely. I mean, as you see, funding's been cut to the food and shelter program, humanitarian funding for these nonprofits. But he's saying they have to step up. The time is now. No one else is going to do this for those people, to let them have their due process and their time, and just to de-escalate the situation. It's interesting. They say that they should form a rapid response team, maybe have a network of people that get called as soon as they hear of an ICE raid, publicize it, and then this group goes, films it, documents it. They really want a coordinated transparency documenting everything that's happening in our country.
Yeah, it's very interesting that he would say that he's asking these faith-based leaders to step up against the Trump administration, because in some cases, like as you just mentioned with Sister Norma, it's also taking on the state government as well, in this case with Ken Paxton. Thank you so much for your reporting, Sandra. We appreciate it. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Minelis, your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. Don't forget, if you want to keep up to date on all things Border Report, or get the reporting, or maybe you want to find that link to that faith-based organization toolkit that Sandra Sanchez, our South Texas correspondent, was just talking about, you can find all that information, including previous video episodes, of Border Report Live, all on borderreport.com. So make sure to check it out. Before we go, we wanted to update you on migrant apprehensions. We told you earlier this month of the record low number of undocumented migrants detained at the southern border by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Today, the Republican Congressional Committee on Homeland Security released specific details about those numbers. The group says last month's encounters dropped more than 63% compared to last year, and that on July 20th of this year, as you can see on your screen, only 116 migrants were detained by Border Patrol agents, making it the lowest single-day total in the agency's history. They say last year, on average, 1,800 migrants were crossing the border each and every day. Now, before we go, we wanted to remind you to check out our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a show that tracks the movers and shakers in politics based on one of my favorite things, data. Nextstar's Director of Political Content, Chris Berg, and Director of Emerson College Polling, Spencer Kimball, break it all down for you every single week. The last episode focused on the Texas U.S. Senate race and redistricting with new polling from Emerson College. And there was also some discussion of California's redistricting plan. So make sure to check it out. You can find more at abc27.com or your local Nextstar station's website. For Sandra and Salvador, my name is Rudy Mireles. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.